Back then, General Phoenix Quinn was close to Eric Stuart, and after his death, Lord Crawford believed the Emperor wouldn't choose Prince Tan. But now it seems Prince Tan might strive for that position himself. If Eric Stuart has such intentions, Lord Crawford feels he can at least assist him a bit, which could bring many benefits in the future. Claire Crawford returned home to a joyful atmosphere. While she was away in the Northwest, the household matters were handled by the First Lady and Margaret Seymour, who appeared cordial but were secretly at odds. The First Lady felt proud, believing Lord Crawford favored Vincent Crawford, leading to his association with Prince Lance. Meanwhile, Margaret Seymour aimed to sabotage Vincent's relationship with Prince Lance, hoping her daughter Emily would get close to him. The two women smiled outwardly but harbored deep animosity. Chapter 50, Stepmother Margaret wants to watch the Tigers fight. Claire Crawford's return didn't concern the First Lady or Stepmother Margaret much, as she was no longer a threat to them. After all, Claire had been married off to Prince Tan by Lord Crawford, so they no longer worried about her. But now, Claire had free time. She had promised the original owner of her body to seek justice. Shouldn't they all respect each other and live peacefully now? The First Lady, Stepmother Margaret, Emily, and Vincent were all involved in Claire's past demise. They knew well how Beatrice Stuart had died. While the First Lady and Margaret were busy dealing with each other, they didn't pay attention to Claire's plans. Recently, Claire spread rumors that she often thought about her late mother, Beatrice Stuart, and even set up a memorial for her, which Lord Crawford attended. Stepmother Margaret had a plan. She secretly brought an old servant from the country estate to Maple Woods Court. Springhope led the old woman to Margaret. "Old maid, you shouldn't have the privilege to serve in the mansion again, but I'm giving you this grace, so you should be grateful." The old maid had served Claire Crawford, Beatrice Stuart's daughter, before being sent to the country estate after Beatrice's death. She immediately knelt before Margaret, pledging her loyalty. "Stepmother Margaret, rest assured, my life is yours. Command me, and I will do anything." Margaret watched the old maid express her loyalty, nodding in satisfaction. She had her reasons for bringing the maid back. Although she had half the household authority, Eleanor Crawford was still the First Lady. Seeing Prince Lance almost promised to Vincent, the First Lady's recent unusual activities worried Margaret. She hoped her daughter Emily would marry Prince Lance and become a princess, so she had to plan carefully. If she wanted to eliminate the First Lady, how would she ensure her daughter's future? Margaret, the concubine, said, "Old Lie, if you wish to remain in the Marquis residence, I will send you to Peach Blossom Pavilion. If Claire Crawford asks, just say that the First Lady sent you away." On the night Beatrice Stuart died, the First Lady hurriedly sent you to the countryside estate, gave you silver, and told you to keep quiet. After speaking, Margaret instructed someone to take Old Lie to Peach Blossom Pavilion, with Springhope personally escorting her. At that moment, Claire Crawford was in her room working on some small self-defense items when she saw Springhope bringing someone in. "Third Miss, our concubine said that Old Lie used to serve Miss Stuart. She thought you might need someone to take care of you since you've recently returned and need to replenish your health. Surely, you'll find her service convenient." Claire Crawford lazily smiled and said, "Thank you, concubine Margaret." After seeing Springhope off, Old Lie, who had been respectfully standing aside, approached Claire Crawford with a smile, even nudging Willow Green aside, and fawningly said, "Miss, when the madam was alive, she trusted this old servant the most. Now with me taking care of you, you can rest assured." Claire Crawford tapped her fingers on the table, feeling indifferent about Old Lie's sudden friendliness. Seeing Claire Crawford remain silent, Old Lie poured tea and water. "Old Lie, now that you're at my Peach Blossom Pavilion, is there nothing you want to say?" Claire Crawford's expression was indifferent, unlike her previous warmth towards Old Lie. Old Lie was taken aback, having thought that meeting Claire Crawford would be like before, where a little coaxing would suffice. But now, with Claire Crawford being so cold, Old Lie couldn't grasp her temperament. "Miss, this old servant has something to say. The madam's death back then was strange. She merely caught a cold and passed away. How could her life be so short? After her death, the First Lady took over all of your courtyards, leaving you with just a few people. This old servant is truly worried for you." Claire Crawford listened to Old Lie's rambling, realizing she was implying that Beatrice Stuart's death was caused by the First Lady.
Margaret's scheming was indeed formidable.
If the original Claire heard old Lie's words, she might have believed them, but Claire wasn't so easily fooled. Willow Green, take old Lie to rest. She's getting on in years and might find noise bothersome.
Willow Green immediately understood Claire Crawford's intention to keep old Lie away from their residence. Come along, old Lie. See how much the miss cares for you, you should be grateful. After Willow Green finished speaking, she immediately pulled Mrs. Lie down.
For several consecutive days, Claire Crawford remained inactive, causing concubine Margaret to become anxious. She took the risk of sending Spring Hope at night to meet Mrs. Lie, instructing her to quickly sow discord between Claire Crawford and the main lady. In Claire Crawford's room, Willow Green entered. Mrs. Lie indeed secretly met with Spring Hope from concubine Margaret's side. Thinking about how Mrs. Lie was placed by concubine Margaret, Willow Green gritted her teeth in anger.
How could someone be so ungrateful? Lady Stuart treated Mrs. Lie well when she was alive, yet now Mrs. Lie repaid kindness with enmity. Willow Green wished she could just send her away. Have someone secretly monitor her, make sure she doesn't find out.
Claire Crawford had long known that concubine Margaret had no good intentions. As soon as Mrs. Lie arrived, she spoke ill of the main lady. Although the main lady might not be a good person, concubine Margaret wanted to watch them fight like tigers from a safe distance, which was treating people like fools. Miss, the death of the lady back then surely involved both concubine Margaret and the main lady. The lady's medicine was handled by concubine Margaret, but on the night of the lady's death, the main lady sent people to disperse everyone in your courtyard. Willow Green wanted to remind Claire Crawford that the events of the past were likely not as simple as they seemed.
Willow Green, remember, until you are certain, never reveal your true thoughts. How could Claire Crawford not see through this? The original owner's mother's death was definitely not due to a cold, but without concrete evidence, she couldn't show any suspicion to avoid alerting the enemy. Eric Stuart occasionally visited, enjoying the desserts at Peach Blossom Pavilion without getting tired of them.
Naturally, the treats he brought for Claire Crawford were also delicious.
Prince Lance, do you have nothing better to do? Wandering around my place every day?
Claire Crawford was getting a headache from Eric Stuart's frequent visits, while Prince Lance had been unusually quiet lately, likely the calm before the storm, waiting for something unknown.
Everyone in the capital knows I am infatuated with you, so what's wrong with spending some time here? Besides, I am confident you prefer me over Prince Lance. Eric Stuart said, causing Claire Crawford to frown. Eric Stuart was indeed better than Prince Lance, but since when did he become so smooth-talking? Wasn't he always cold before?
As they talked, Mrs. Lie, unaware of the situation, barged in. Though she made excellent goat milk pastries, interrupting the master's conversation was unacceptable.
Is this how your servants behave, without understanding the rules?
Eric Stuart, familiar with Peach Blossom Pavilion, had visited enough to know everyone there, and he didn't believe Claire Crawford wasn't wary of Mrs. Lie.
Mrs. Lie, you served my mother, do you not even know basic etiquette? Claire Crawford frowned, glancing at Mrs. Lie. Willow Green quickly chimed in, oh dear, Mrs. Lie, weren't you assigned to the small kitchen? Why are you out here disturbing the Miss and His Highness?
Eric Stuart watched the two play their roles, coordinating perfectly. Since you've disturbed me, take her out and give her 20 lashes.
Though 20 lashes wouldn't kill Mrs. Lie, it would certainly injure her severely.
This injured dog would naturally return to her master to complain.
Claire Crawford didn't stop it, so Willow Green understood and had the Crawford family's men drag Mrs. Lie out.
Poor Mrs. Lie didn't even have time to beg for mercy before being beaten miserably, her cries echoing throughout Peach Blossom Pavilion. Since it was Eric Stuart's order, Claire Crawford didn't have to bear the bad reputation of bullying elders, and she remained content and carefree. Chapter 51, Margaret Seymour wins over Claire Crawford. After that day, the old lady was bedridden for over 10 days before she could walk again. Naturally, she didn't take this lying down and went around spreading rumors about Claire Crawford's heartlessness. She claimed that she fell ill from serving Claire's young mistress and now, after being beaten, she was nearly crippled.
However, this wasn't Margaret Seymour's intention.
Her original plan was to pit Claire Crawford against the matriarch, allowing her to reap the benefits. But now, with the old lady causing such a scene, it was Margaret who ended up bearing the blame. Margaret never anticipated that the old lady would lose control, leaving her no choice but to personally explain the situation.
Margaret Seymour now realized she mustn't oppose Claire Crawford. Although she once wished to eliminate Claire, now she knew any confrontation was out of the question. Claire Crawford was enjoying her homemade milk tea in her cozy pavilion when she unexpectedly saw Margaret Seymour approaching with a smile.
"Claire, the Lord recently acquired some fine fabric, and I've instructed them to make you 2 fox fur coats." Margaret's actions were clearly an attempt to curry favor. In the past, she would never have done such a thing, but now, seeing that Prince Lance had no ties to her, it was different. While maintaining an outward relationship, Margaret had managed to get close to Lord Crawford, and naturally, she needed to align with Claire to handle the matriarch.
"Thank you, Margaret Seymour."
Claire understood Margaret's intentions but chose not to expose her, instead smiling and standing to welcome her.
Not showing coldness indicated potential for collaboration.
Margaret, being shrewd, understood this and, while holding Claire's hand, explained with a smile, "Claire, I truly didn't know about the old lady's actions. I had no idea she would spread rumors about you. My intention in bringing her was to care for you, not to cause trouble.
It really bothers me."
With Margaret speaking this way, if Claire wanted to draw her in, she had to reciprocate with kind words.
"Margaret Seymour, you're being too serious.
The old lady offended Prince Lance on her own, it has nothing to do with you."
"You meant well, and I understand that."
Claire mentioned Prince Lance, indicating that the matter wasn't solely in her hands, it depended on Lord Crawford's decision. "Margaret Seymour, over the years, the young mistress has been kind to me.
I'm not one to hold grudges, and I've forgotten past issues. But regarding Prince Lance, it's ultimately up to my father. Don't you agree?" Claire subtly hinted that any relationship with Prince Lance required Lord Crawford's blessing.
Margaret knew that to secure Prince Lance, she needed Lord Crawford's approval.
However, Lord Crawford clearly preferred Vincent Crawford's connection with Prince Lance.
Hence, any plans Margaret had would be futile unless she took drastic measures. Claire, holding Margaret's hand, added, "Margaret Seymour, Prince Lance is a lecherous man. You should act quickly before my second sister makes a decision.
Otherwise, if she agrees, how will you face the matriarch then?"
Margaret was alarmed by these words.
If Vincent Crawford married Prince Lance, the matriarch would leave them with nothing.
Therefore, she couldn't let the other side succeed, as it would mean living under someone else's whims in the future. "Claire, you and Emily are sisters by blood. Over there, they are the legitimate daughters, and ultimately, they don't share the same status as us.
Whatever happens, you must always side with your elder sister." Claire Crawford understood Margaret Seymour's implication. Aligning with someone was one thing, but wasn't it also about informing her if Prince Lance made any moves?
Margaret Seymour had given Claire the bracelet she had worn for over 20 years, so Claire naturally understood her intentions. "Don't worry, Mother, I will naturally keep an eye on things for you," Claire reassured Margaret with a smile as she saw her off, only to disdainfully remove the bracelet afterward. Finally, she had managed to lure Margaret Seymour in, now, she could sit back and watch the drama unfold. "Miss, that old woman is causing a commotion again," Willow Green fumed daily, wishing the old lady would just disappear. The old woman spread rumors everywhere, saying Claire Crawford was heartless, and Willow Green wished she could throw her out directly.
"We've been baiting long enough, it's time to end this."
"Go call the old woman here," Claire instructed, and Willow Green's delight was unmistakable. She was eager to deal with the old woman who had become a significant nuisance. If she continued to stay, she might cause a huge uproar at the Peach Blossom Pavilion. When Willow Green went to find the old woman, she was in the small kitchen, boasting about her close relationship with Claire Crawford and how she was a confidant. It was clear she intended to stir trouble.
Willow Green entered and said, "Lie Mama, Miss wants to see you." The old woman assumed Claire Crawford was soft-hearted. Wasn't Margaret Seymour the same before?
Soft-hearted, listening to her suggestions. So, the old woman had been making a fuss, waiting for Claire Crawford to call her. Hearing that Claire wanted to see her, she arrogantly followed, disregarding Willow Green.
Claire was in the warm pavilion, sipping her milk tea.
Margaret Seymour had already been dealt with, so the old woman was no longer needed.
Unaware of this, the old woman strutted in. Miss, what brings you to call an old woman like me today? The old woman believed that because she had once served Beatrice Stewart, Claire had to respect her. Claire glanced at Willow Green and instructed, "Willow Green, bring a basin of charcoal here." Although unsure why her mistress gave such an order, Willow Green promptly complied. Soon, she returned with a basin of charcoal. "Old woman, after all these years, you never sought me out, but now you've suddenly appeared. Initially, you told me those things, do you have any other thoughts now?" Claire's sudden question left the old woman dumbfounded. She always thought Beatrice Stewart was weak and easy to bully, never expecting Claire to bring up the past. "Miss, every word I've spoken is sincere. I have always been loyal and devoted to you, thinking of you all these years, but unfortunately, I couldn't leave the manor." Sincere? Claire Crawford took another sip of her bubble tea, wondering why it tasted a bit bland today. "If you say you are sincere towards me, then next, I'll ask, can you answer? If you answer incorrectly, I'll make you prove your sincerity." Claire Crawford put down her bubble tea and stared intently at the old woman. The woman looked deceitful. Anyone with some discernment wouldn't believe her words. "Miss, you just ask, I will definitely tell you everything I know without hiding anything," the old woman said, unaware of the impending trouble. Claire Crawford casually fiddled with a fire poker in her hand and smiled. "Why don't you tell me how my mother died?" There was a murderous intent in Claire Crawford's eyes, as if those eyes could kill. The old woman looked up and was indeed frightened by that gaze. Of course, it was the first wife. The old woman immediately pointed the finger at the first wife. Claire Crawford smiled and retorted, "Did you see the first wife kill my mother with your own eyes?" The old woman was momentarily speechless, as these words were taught to her by Margaret Seymour, but now, Claire Crawford seemed not so easily fooled. The old woman was a bit scared but tried to stay calm. "After my mother died, the first wife immediately dismissed everyone around her, even her confidants were sent away." "Isn't that obviously guilty?" After the old woman finished speaking, Claire Crawford laughed. Her words were quite amusing, as if she thought Claire was a fool. Did she really think Claire was that easily deceived? Chapter 52, The old woman speaks the truth. Old lady, I call you respectfully, but with things as they are, you should tell me the truth. You've served my mother for many years, claiming affection. Now, at least tell me one true thing so you can face my mother's spirit in the heavens. Claire Crawford spoke kindly, hoping the other person would realize that sometimes people are giving you a chance, and you must seize it. But if given such an opportunity and you don't grasp it, naturally, there are other ways waiting for you. The old woman was clearly not the intelligent type. She didn't seem like someone who could speak the truth. "Oh dear, what are you saying?" "I speak only the truth, from the bottom of my heart, without a single false word," the old woman said, rolling her eyes, her words laughable. Claire Crawford nodded with a smile, realizing someone was refusing a polite offer in favor of a harsher one. Just then, Eric Stewart appeared, and it was unclear what he was planning. Lately, always showing up as if nothing was amiss. "Miss Crawford, am I interrupting your interrogation?" Eric Stewart asked, immediately understanding the situation. To a smart person, the issues of the inner courtyard are evident at a glance. Clearly, this old woman was sent by someone to muddle through, and a smart person could see that immediately. If not smart, one would only be deceived. Does Prince Eric really not know? Do you truly think this place is your prince's manor? Claire Crawford looked at Eric Stewart with displeasure. The old woman didn't expect Claire Crawford and Eric Stewart to interact in such a manner, knowing he was a prince and not someone to be treated casually. Anyone visiting the manor should be respectful, yet Claire Crawford didn't even stand up, and Eric Stewart, as prince, seemed indifferent to her disrespect. The old woman suddenly realized something was slipping out of her control. "Have you figured it out yet? If you are truly smart, you should tell me everything you know. I'll give you one more chance, tell me how my mother died?" Claire Crawford's voice wasn't loud but carried an undeniable authority. The old woman still harbored a glimmer of hope, thinking that as long as the truth wasn't discovered, she could keep silent. With a thud, she knelt on the ground, seemingly full of sincerity. "Miss, every word I say is true. I'm merely speculating without any concrete evidence.
If you truly wish to inquire, I can only analyze the situation for you, I cannot definitively identify the culprit. My loyalty to you is unwavering, as the sun and moon can attest.
You must believe me. Lai Yata was still hoping to deceive Claire Crawford, to brush off this matter and gain Claire's trust.
Perhaps in the future, she could accompany Claire to the prince's residence and live there. By then, she would transform into the steward beside the princess, basking in glory. However, Lai Yata forgot that Claire Crawford was no longer the naive child who believed everything she heard.
Alright, since you say so, I'll give you a chance to prove your loyalty.
If you can do it, I'll trust you, Claire Crawford said, giving Lai Yata a glimmer of hope.
Miss, just command me. Whatever you ask, I can do it. I'm willing to risk my life for you, without hesitation.
Such grand words are always pleasing, but only those who truly act on them deserve to be called loyal.
See the brazier in front of you? Take a piece of coal and hold it in your mouth.
If you can do it, I'll believe in your loyalty and that you haven't betrayed my mother for money, Claire Crawford said, her eyes not even lifting.
Lai Yata trembled in fear.
She never expected Claire to be so cold and ruthless, ordering her to do such a thing. The coal was burning fiercely, touching it with bare hands would cause blisters, let alone putting it in the mouth.
Wasn't this a death sentence? Miss, what are you saying? How can you say such things? I've served your mother for many years. How can you not trust me?
Lai Yata was a master at acting, speaking these words while crying pitifully, as if truly wronged.
Claire Crawford smiled faintly, seeing through the act.
Lai Yata, your daughter asked me to pass a message. Treat your young lady well. Eric Stewart, who had been watching the scene unfold, finally spoke, producing a silver bracelet.
Seeing the bracelet, Lai Yata collapsed to the ground in genuine fear. Indeed, striking at one's weakness makes them obedient.
The bracelet belonged to Lai Yata's daughter, her only child, and now she appeared utterly defeated.
How could a mere servant fight against those in power?
I'll speak.
What do you want to know?
I'll tell you everything.
Please don't harm my daughter, Lai Yata pleaded in genuine fear.
The truth, tell us everything you know. If you lie, your entire family will be in danger. But if you tell the truth, I promise only your life will be taken. Decide whether you want to live alone or save your family, Eric Stewart said, leaving Lai Yata no choice but to confess. Beatrice Stewart was beautiful and favored, and shortly after giving birth to Claire Crawford, she became pregnant again. But the first wife and Margaret Seymour were not to be trifled with. Beatrice, though beautiful, was somewhat meek. Thus, she kept her pregnancy a secret, planning to reveal it to Lord Crawford when her belly grew noticeable. However, Margaret Seymour discovered the secret, bribed the doctor to harm the child, and even plotted to kill Beatrice. Lai Yata, though initially loyal, turned a blind eye when offered money by Margaret, knowing the entire plan but not participating. Beatrice thought she had merely caught a cold, unaware she was being slowly consumed by other schemes. Her meekness led to her demise, leaving Claire Crawford to grow up alone in the harsh environment, enduring countless hardships and grievances, shaping her current character. Margaret Seymour did all these things.
And the matriarch saw it all.
This time, however, the matriarch also secretly participated, which is why the matter was suppressed. The old servant confessed everything, only begging Claire Crawford to spare her daughter.
Willow Green, take her away, Claire Crawford calmly ordered.
After the old servant was taken away, Eric Stewart was even more tense than Claire Crawford. He observed her reaction while saying, "Rest assured, your mother's enemies are my enemies, and I will help you get revenge." Seeing Eric Stewart's determined demeanor, Claire Crawford truly didn't want to argue with him. Revenge was a must. But Claire Crawford was avenging the original owner of this body, and Eric Stewart acted as if only with his help could she succeed.
Does Prince Eric think I lack the ability to seek revenge myself? Claire Crawford retorted, I can handle my own vengeance, I don't need Prince Eric's help.
Eric Stewart's attempt to express his feelings was promptly shut down, his face showing a hint of embarrassment.
How could you say that? Your mother is like my own, and we are family now, no need to be so formal, Eric Stewart replied, returning to his seat with a bit of awkwardness. Claire Crawford glanced at Eric Stewart, watching him drink half of her milk tea. Talking is one thing, seeking revenge is another, but why drink her milk tea? She had worked hard to create it, and now he was competing with her for it? This was too much.
Chapter 53. The first enemy who harmed her mother. Claire Crawford did not fully grasp the meaning behind the Queen's words, nor did she understand what warning was being given. Nevertheless, with such a warning, she had to be cautious.
At this moment, the annoying Emily Crawford appeared again, as persistent as a ghost.
Claire, don't misunderstand, I was just worried about you, so I followed to check.
Seeing you're all right, I'm relieved.
Emily Crawford was a skilled actress, with her big, innocent eyes making it hard not to believe her.
Right now, you should keep an eye on Prince Lance. Look, the matriarch has already pulled Vincent Crawford to approach Prince Lance.
If she succeeds, you really won't have a chance in the future. Claire Crawford put on a face ready to watch the drama unfold. She didn't care how they wanted to fight, it had nothing to do with her, but she was definitely curious. Watching the thick-skinned lady lead Vincent Crawford to find Prince Lance among so many people, even with the Emperor present, although the gathering below was informal, few dared to act recklessly. Claire Crawford knew that Lord Crawford was almost ready to speak with the Emperor. However, she also understood that the more clearly Lord Crawford acted, the more dangerous it became.
Surely the Emperor wasn't a fool?
As long as the Emperor wasn't foolish, he would see through their schemes. Yet, the Emperor hadn't voiced any objections, indicating that not only did he see through their plans, but he also chose to ignore them. It was unclear what game the Emperor was playing. The smarter ones couldn't grasp the situation at this moment. Claire Crawford remained honest, not actively engaging with anyone, as if none of this concerned her. Things are about to get chaotic over there, and here you are, drinking, Eric Stewart remarked.
He was the most idle person around, unnoticed by many.
After the Empress's birthday, he became quite free, yet he had the time to tease her, clearly having nothing better to do.
Stay away from me. The Emperor is up to something sinister, I don't want you dragging me into it.
I want to return home later and sleep peacefully. Being with you is asking for trouble, Claire Crawford said earnestly, glancing at Emily Crawford with resentment.
Emily truly hated Vincent Crawford to the core. Two women fighting over one man never ends well.
You still have the face to mock others.
Do you know what people are saying about you?
They're saying you can't keep your man, that many are eyeing you, and that you're drinking to drown your sorrows. I'm here out of goodwill to shield you, you ungrateful girl.
Why don't you thank me? Claire Crawford looked at the scene and suddenly laughed.
Such speculation sounded plausible, and the rumor was likely spread by royal consort Florence. Currently, Lord Crawford was with Vincent Crawford speaking to Prince Lance, leaving her aside, indeed like a wronged little wife.
Miss Crawford, royal consort Florence sent me to give you a bottle of fine plum wine, saying you're not used to stronger drinks.
The young maid had an unfamiliar face, clearly someone she hadn't seen before.
What was royal consort Florence plotting?
Claire knew Florence had no good intentions, but she couldn't figure out what they were. Now, sending a bottle of wine was suspicious. Thank you, please convey my gratitude to the royal consort, Claire said with a squinting smile, as if unaware of anything. But she was very smart, clearly cunning. After the maid left, she stared at the wine bottle for a long time. The old woman offering wine couldn't mean harm, but the wine was certainly not poisoned, not enough to kill with just one sip.
What are you thinking? Eric Stewart noticed her absent-mindedness and kindly asked, what is royal consort Florence thinking?
Royal consort Florence had brought the wine so boldly, suggesting there was nothing wrong with it. However, if she wasn't foolish, she wouldn't do such a meaningless thing.
So, what was peculiar about this wine? What exactly does Marquis Crawford intend?
Anyone with clear vision can see it.
Do you think, given my current status, she would easily let go of such a lucrative opportunity?
Royal consort Florence's actions likely had one purpose, to silence the opposition before Marquis Crawford could speak. Surely, the Emperor saw this too but chose not to intervene.
Claire Crawford understood these things clearly and had a plan in mind.
Just because she didn't want it didn't mean others wouldn't. Someone might be desperate enough to seize this position and dare to scheme against her, so they shouldn't fear embarrassment.
Dear sister, look how Prince Lance and our second sister are chatting so happily." Claire Crawford deliberately pointed out to Emily Crawford, hoping to stir jealousy in her. Emily had been watching them closely and now appeared anxious.
"Actually, Margaret Seymour mentioned to me before that our social standing isn't high. Even though you're the eldest daughter, in father's eyes, it doesn't count for much. If you want to secure a path for yourself, don't fear taking risks.
Only by being bold can you find happiness. As for me, I don't want any entanglement with Prince Lance, but I can't afford to consume the wine royal consort Florence bestowed." Emily Crawford was currently anxious, aware that her chances were slim, yet she persisted. The difference was that Emily truly liked Prince Lance, unlike other women.
Glancing at the wine royal consort Florence gave, she seemed to have made up her mind.
After reminding Emily, Claire Crawford smiled mischievously at Eric Stewart.
Eric Stewart, having not eaten much all evening, was about to eat something when he noticed Claire smiling at him.
Why did her smile seem so unusual?
A vague sense of fear arose in him. Royal consort Florence probably hoped she'd get drunk and something would happen with Prince Lance. However, Prince Lance was currently entangled with Marquis Crawford, and the maid sent by Royal consort Florence was still watching. If Royal consort Florence knew the wine she gave was consumed by her, causing a scene with Prince Lance, but she ended up with Prince Tan, what a sight it would be.
It would probably make her furious. "Prince Tan, I've noticed you haven't had much to do all evening. Would you like to leave early?" Claire Crawford asked with a smile. Leave early?
Eric Stewart indeed wanted to leave early, but he didn't have the privilege.
The Emperor didn't favor him, so he could only wait here. But Claire's question made him feel a bit unlucky.
Then, Eric saw Claire drink a cup of wine, but it wasn't the wine from Royal consort Florence. Next, Claire walked over. At that moment, Prince Lance was being held by the madam, talking to Vincent Crawford, unable to offend Marquis Crawford, clearly under his instruction, feeling quite annoyed. The only fortunate thing for Prince Lance was that Vincent Crawford didn't seem interested, so they hadn't spoken much before seeing Claire slowly approaching. Madam was confused as to why this girl was coming here.
Wasn't she supposed to talk to Prince Tan?
Madam had instructed this clearly at Marquis Crawford's residence, and the sudden change left her displeased. Seeing Claire approach, Vincent Crawford felt relieved and quickly said, "Since you're here, I'll leave first." Vincent didn't say much, considering herself the legitimate daughter, feeling no need to explain, especially since she wasn't interested in Prince Lance.
But Claire understood Vincent's little thoughts clearly. She took Vincent's hand and smiled at her mysteriously.
On the day the original host fell ill, Vincent, under the pretext of feeling unwell, forcibly called the doctor and locked her in a room, leading to the death of the original host's mother. Now, this grudge could be avenged.
Do you not know when to stop? Why does my second sister keep opposing me everywhere? If you like Prince Lance, I can step aside for you, but what are you doing now? Secretly undermining me?
Claire Crawford looked as if she were drunk, her small face flushed, appearing extremely aggrieved. Yet, everyone heard her words clearly.
Vincent Crawford was stealing Prince Lance.
Everyone knew Claire Crawford and Prince Lance were engaged, although one was entangled with the King of Tan, and Prince Lance was flirting with other women. But now, it seemed Vincent Crawford had snatched Claire Crawford's betrothed. Originally sisters by blood, they now turned against each other and spoke bluntly in front of everyone, making many spectators amused.
What nonsense are you talking about? Be quiet. Vincent Crawford's face turned pale. What did this mean? Wasn't it already clear in the mansion?
Vincent Crawford never agreed, but the Duke Crawford and her mother wanted her to have something with Prince Lance. Vincent Crawford didn't want to, but she didn't dare to resist.
But now, with Claire Crawford causing such a scene, what was happening? Vincent Crawford was bewildered, not understanding why Claire Crawford was acting this way. Don't pretend anymore, second sister. If you love Prince Lance, as your sister, I naturally won't fight for the one you love.
Claire Crawford played the victim, and by making a scene today, it seemed everyone would know Vincent Crawford's intentions. Vincent Crawford couldn't defend herself, wanting to explain, but everyone was watching the spectacle.
Claire Crawford looked pitiful, crying with red eyes, staring at Vincent Crawford.
Eric Stewart found it amusing, not expecting Claire Crawford to come up with such a lousy idea.
Everyone present was entertained, yet Duke Crawford remained silent.
Those causing the commotion were from the Duke's household, but regardless of how much Claire and Vincent Crawford argued, the one embarrassed was Prince Lance.
In fact, Duke Crawford didn't care about anything else, only the outcome.
This was why Claire Crawford could make a scene without concern for her reputation.
Moreover, she wouldn't be the one embarrassed.
Vincent Crawford took the man who was nominally hers, and in others' eyes, this legitimate daughter seemed to bully others with her status.
Claire Crawford, I'll tear your mouth apart. Vincent Crawford, pampered since childhood, couldn't bear being falsely accused like this.
Her hands came down in a slap. In reality, if she could endure it, it might have been better, but fearing she couldn't, this slap would cause trouble. Claire Crawford achieved her goal. So, she turned angrily to Prince Lance. Prince Lance, even though I am the illegitimate daughter of the Crawfords, I still have some dignity.
I haven't even entered the door yet, and you're already flirting with my sister. If that's the case, I hope you personally go to the Emperor and annul the engagement between us. I will make way for you too. If you don't clarify with the Emperor, I will go myself. Prince Lance had never experienced anything like this.
When Claire Crawford made such a fuss, he was bewildered, not knowing what had happened. Now, suddenly treated like this, he hadn't even had the chance to explain or speak before Claire Crawford left.
Naturally, she didn't leave alone. Claire Crawford had suffered such great injustice, and Eric Stewart, who always loved Claire Crawford, couldn't just stand by and watch.
Prince Lance, if you want to play both sides, that's really too much. Eric Stewart added fuel to the fire, then chased after her.
What benefit did Claire Crawford get from making such a scene? The relationship between Vincent Crawford and Prince Lance was completely exposed, which actually helped Duke Crawford. Now, Duke Crawford and the main wife were very pleased. Although the reputation wasn't great, Vincent Crawford and Prince Lance were now tied together.
Claire Crawford went with Eric Stewart, and everything developed according to Duke Crawford's plan. Duke Crawford, who only cared about results, naturally wouldn't blame Claire Crawford, even seeing her as someone who could help him. Only Emily Crawford, standing aside and nearly forgotten, was twisting her handkerchief, sweating coldly.
With Vincent Crawford and Prince Lance together, what would she do? This was something she absolutely didn't want to see.
So, when she saw Prince Lance's eyes about to flare up in anger, Emily Crawford knew her chance had come. Prince Lance, being played with for no reason, was certainly unhappy and left in anger. Emily Crawford then drank the wine royal consort Florence had given Claire Crawford, seeing it as her last chance.
If she didn't seize it, who knew what would become of her in the future?
So, she decided to take a risk. Claire Crawford was pretending all along, and as she got into the carriage, Eric Stewart followed her inside, conveniently bringing some snacks for Claire Crawford.
Your acting was quite convincing. Claire Crawford raised an eyebrow and said, "Isn't His Highness Prince Tam the same?"
Eric Stewart was momentarily stunned, then wiped his handsome mouth and said, "This prince is expressing true feelings.
I should have fought Prince Lance to let everyone know that I love you." Love? Claire Crawford didn't believe it.
Although the carriage moved slowly forward, it didn't go far before turning into a corner next to the palace and stopping.
As expected, Claire Crawford saw Emily Crawford and Prince Lance hurriedly leaving.
"Did you set up such a big trap just to get back at Emily Crawford?"
Eric Stewart was somewhat puzzled by Claire Crawford.
She didn't seem like someone petty, nor someone who would cling to trivial matters. But now, Claire Crawford was clearly plotting against Emily Crawford, including what she had said to her earlier, which led Emily Crawford to recklessly board Prince Lance's carriage.
Perhaps she even drank the plum wine that royal consort Florence had given to Claire Crawford. What's wrong? Is His Highness Prince Tan just realizing that I'm a ruthless woman? Claire Crawford didn't deny it, she indeed intentionally plotted against Emily Crawford. Wasn't it obvious? Although Eric Stewart was curious, he had no intention of defending Emily Crawford. Claire Crawford watched Prince Lance's carriage slowly leave, a smile playing on her lips.
The second person who harmed the original owner's young lady, Emily Crawford. Her coquettish behavior prevented Lord Crawford from visiting Beatrice Stuart, leading to Beatrice Stuart dying without peace.
Claire Crawford remembered it all for the original owner.
Everyone involved couldn't escape, it just wasn't the right time before. Now that the time had come, those who needed to pay would not escape.
Follow them, Claire Crawford said, and Eric Stuart ordered 7 Moon to follow Prince Lance's carriage. She needed to find out where Prince Lance took Emily Crawford. Prince Lance was clever and wouldn't take her directly to his residence. Vincent Crawford was very aloof, and Prince Lance didn't like that. Since he didn't like it, he would find someone he did. Emily Crawford was now willingly offering herself, and with the teachings of Margaret Seymour, it was certain that the wine was having its intended effect. Watching Prince Lance stop the carriage at another house, a small courtyard that seemed perfect for hiding a mistress, Claire Crawford knew that women who offered themselves would not have a good outcome. Unfortunately, Emily Crawford didn't understand this and rushed into it.
"Look at the romance inside, you've come out with me, so give me a kiss," Eric Stuart joked, not intending to take advantage. But even jokingly, he was slapped, though he dodged quickly, and the slap landed on his shoulder.
Eric Stuart grinned smugly.
Immediately after, Claire Crawford kicked him. In the cramped space of the carriage, her kick landed on Eric Stuart's sensitive area. Eric Stuart clutched himself, looking incredulous.
"Don't you know when to stop?"
Claire Crawford's face flushed red, a rare occurrence, as it was purely accidental. Who would have thought she'd hit that spot?
Take me home."
It was rare to see Claire Crawford's face turn red, and Eric Stuart found it amusing. The Crawford's girl could be embarrassed, he thought she was as tough as steel. Chapter 55, Repaying Margaret Seymour at the Marquis's residence. The First Lady had been waiting at the Plum Blossom Pavilion since early morning.
When she saw Claire Crawford return, she arrogantly flaunted her authority. "Oh, you still know the way back?
Look at the mess you've caused.
Today you threw a tantrum and left. Has your mind gone astray?
You dared to say in front of everyone that it's fortunate His Majesty left early, otherwise, if he laid blame, you'd implicate the entire family." Vincent Crawford stormed in, visibly upset. She never liked Prince Lance, yet now she was forced to be entangled with him, making her extremely uncomfortable. Claire Crawford, anticipating trouble from these two, had already devised a plan.
"First Lady, do you know why you haven't been able to outmatch Margaret Seymour all these years?"
Claire Crawford coldly smiled at the First Lady, finding her quite foolish. She was eager for Vincent Crawford to get involved with Prince Lance, and now that they were connected, what more could she want? Everyone believed Prince Lance had changed his affections, so what was the First Lady dissatisfied about?
"Are you mocking me?" The First Lady didn't want to hear the name Margaret Seymour.
After years of conflict, she had lost to Margaret, who not only survived but thrived in the Marquis's household.
"No, I'm reminding you."
Claire Crawford ignored Vincent Crawford's attitude, feeling it was necessary to remind the First Lady.
"Today I caused a scene, forcing Prince Lance to acknowledge his affection for the second sister. First Lady, both you and Margaret Seymour want to marry your daughters to Prince Lance. Isn't what I did today helping you?"
Hearing this, the First Lady seemed to see some logic. Vincent Crawford stood by, ready to explode. She had no interest in Prince Lance. Claire Crawford had ruined her today, and she couldn't let that go.
"Claire Crawford, you scheming wench, daring to plot against me.
I thought you were honest, but you're full of deceit." Vincent Crawford moved to attack, but the First Lady held her back.
"How rude, where are your manners now?" After Claire Crawford's suggestion, the First Lady understood. No matter how much they made
a fuss today, the Marquis wouldn't support them. It was better to join forces against the other side, releasing some of their long-held grievances. "Claire, among the 3 sisters, you're the most sensible. I haven't been attentive enough in the past, and I apologize. After all, your late mother and I were like sisters, and she entrusted your care to me. I've failed her over the years." The First Lady knew when to yield, lowering her stance after realizing this. Claire Crawford gave a faint smile, saying, "First Lady, you've always been busy, and you've taken good care of Claire.
But Margaret Seymour has also been very attentive to Claire." Claire Crawford pretended to stay neutral, while the First Lady's eyes flickered. That wench Margaret Seymour had her weaknesses, but it wasn't convenient for the First Lady to act directly, so she said, "Margaret Seymour has indeed cared for you well over the years, relying on her family's medical skills. Speaking of which, you were often unwell before. I heard the Marquis changed your physician. Is your health better now?" The First Lady's intentions were almost explicit, hinting that Margaret Seymour might have tampered with her medicine. Unfortunately, the First Lady's schemes were too foolish. If she had known earlier, why hadn't she stopped it? Claire Crawford knew the First Lady was intentionally speaking this way, but she wanted to lure her into a trap. "First Lady, telling Claire these things, Claire is not ungrateful. Prince Lance returned today, and the eldest sister spoke with him for quite a while, seemingly in good spirits." Claire Crawford subtly pointed out to the First Lady. Based on the vigilance of the First Lady, she will undoubtedly be monitoring Emily Crawford and Margaret Seymour these days, absolutely not allowing this little troublemaker to ruin the good things between Vincent Crawford and Prince Lance. After the First Lady left, Claire Crawford finally stopped laughing, her jaw aching from the effort, wondering how these people managed to pretend every day without getting exhausted. "Miss, I've brought hot water for you to soak your feet. It also contains rose essential oil, as per Prince Lance's special instructions." Claire Crawford nodded. Compared to Prince Lance's attempts to win her favor, Eric Stewart's kindness seamlessly blended into her life, reminiscent of her fiancé from a past life. How could there be someone so similar in this world, even in personality, yet not from the same time and space? Claire Crawford didn't understand why Eric Stewart resembled her former fiancé so much, but she was truly determined to help him. If she had to choose someone, Eric Stewart didn't seem too bad. But the premise was only to help, with no other intentions. The First Lady was indeed clever, immediately deciding to monitor the opponent, even at the cost of some expense. Emily Crawford, having come down from Prince Lance's bed, felt that things were going well, floating on air like a fairy even while walking these days. "Tell me, did Prince Lance personally promise you anything?" Margaret Seymour was the most worried. Although the idea was hers to help her daughter, she knew it wasn't entirely proper, and under no circumstances should it be discovered by others. As long as they could please Prince Lance, if he didn't favor Vincent Crawford and instead liked her daughter Emily, they could simply ask the Marquis to replace Vincent with Emily. Margaret Seymour's plan was quite sound, but she still questioned Emily, as it had been several days without any apparent movement from Prince Lance. "Mother, Prince Lance did personally say he wanted me to be his consort." Emily Crawford liked Prince Lance, but little did she know that words spoken by men in bed couldn't be trusted. Prince Lance had only said it casually, but Emily took it seriously. Prince Lance was merely attracted to Emily's beauty and her willingness to offer herself, needing someone to vent his anger on that day. As for Emily, Prince Lance had almost forgotten about her. Margaret Seymour sensed something was off, knowing her daughter's temperament best. They couldn't continue like this. She needed to arrange another meeting between Prince Lance and her daughter. So, Margaret Seymour had been diligently visiting the Peach Blossom Pavilion these days, gifting items and clothes. With New Year's Eve approaching, aside from managing the affairs in the Marquis household, her main concern was that Claire Crawford went out every day, possibly meeting Prince Lance. "Claire, you should take your elder sister out to see the world a bit. Otherwise, when she gets married, she might be too rigid and not know how to manage a household." Margaret Seymour, like a cunning fox, but Claire Crawford didn't expose her. Margaret Seymour's calculations were quite good, and Claire was very pleased. "Just visiting shops and occasionally meeting some old acquaintances," Claire said. These old acquaintances could be Eric Stewart, who might jump into her carriage at any moment or offer her food at any time. But of course, she couldn't let Margaret Seymour know about these things. A new establishment called Yunlin Pavilion has opened in the capital. It's said to be full of talented people, and many noble ladies enjoy going there. Even Prince Lance likes to visit. Claire Crawford seemed to repay Margaret Seymour's kindness for gifting her fine fur. Margaret Seymour laughed heartily, repeatedly praising, "You really care for your elder sister, you're truly close to her." "Indeed." Claire Crawford smiled. "Close to Emily Crawford?" She was very close, indeed. After Margaret Seymour left, Claire knew she would find an opportunity for Emily to interact with Prince Lance,
and the First Lady would secretly send someone to follow them. By then, the drama in the Marquis household would be quite lively. New Year's Eve? This New Year's Eve, the Marquis household wouldn't have peace. After the festivities, the entire capital would ridicule the Marquis family, and the reputation of the Crawford daughters would be ruined. Then, she could conveniently enter the prince's mansion. But before that, she needed to make a pact with Eric Stuart. Lately, he seemed to be acting a bit dishonestly, and she didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. She didn't want the events of her previous life to happen again. Chapter 56, Jealousy at the King Tan Mansion. It had been years since any woman set foot there. Claire Crawford's arrival truly brightened the place. Eric Stuart, practicing in his training room, hurried outside upon hearing of her visit. The female musician playing for him also followed. Despite the cold winter, Eric Stuart was drenched in sweat, with the musician trailing behind. Claire Crawford observed for a while before speaking, "Your Highness, Quinn Vaughan, am I interrupting something?" The female musician was beautiful, and Eric Stuart, being in his prime, seemed like a match made in heaven. Who knew what might happen? Jealous, are you? Eric Stuart squinted, his expression full of implication. The musician wisely fetched a cloak for him, saying, "It's cold, Your Grace. Be careful not to catch a chill." Oh no. Eric Stuart had been joking, but now it seemed serious. "The Crawford girl rarely visits, come inside," Eric said, pleased. Claire followed him in, noticing the decor reflected Eric's tastes, cool tones, lacking any vibrant colors, indicating a woman's absence. A solitary plum blossom on the table resembled the unique beauty of the musician, Linda Stevenson. "Miss Crawford, please have some tea." "I don't know your preference, but this is Vu Tien Long Ten, the Duke's favorite. I hope you like it." Claire smiled, recognizing the musician's subtle claim of territory, but she wasn't here to cause trouble. She had matters to discuss with Eric. "Thank you," she replied coolly, ignoring the musician's intentions. Eric then spoke, "Linda Stevenson, leave us. I have matters to discuss with Miss Crawford." The musician left, and Claire didn't touch the tea, instead focusing on Eric. "Miss Crawford, why are you staring at me?" "I know I'm handsome, but you can't just stare," Eric jested, clearly unfazed by the musician. Claire shook her head. She knew she would eventually marry Eric, but certain matters needed clarification. "Your Highness, Quinn Vaughan, I've chosen you, so we should be the best partners. If I enter Quinn Vaughan Mansion, I hope you'll give me my own space, and we won't interfere with each other." She hoped for peace in Quinn Vaughan Mansion, unlike the chaos in the Marquis' residence. Claire disliked uncertain battles. Of course, Eric agreed readily, willing to concede anything to have Claire. Claire frowned, wanting a serious discussion, but Eric seemed uninterested. "I'm serious," Claire insisted. Eric sipped his tea, replying, "I'm listening seriously." What more could Claire say? "So, do you agree?" Claire wanted their lives separate after marriage, helping Eric achieve his goals before parting ways. She didn't want to repeat past mistakes or get emotionally entangled with Eric again. Helping him in this life was to repay a past debt. Claire's thoughts didn't align with Eric's. He had plans to bring her to Quinn Vaughan Mansion first, dealing with everything else later. Thus, their conversation ended amicably, both satisfied. Back at the Marquis' residence, the madam kept an eye on Margaret Seymour, but Margaret was cunning, managing to sneak Emily Crawford out to meet Prince Lance. Emily was delighted, believing Prince Lance's promises were love. On New Year's Eve, a significant reunion at the Marquis' residence took place. The Madam and Vincent Crawford, Margaret Seymour with Emily, and Claire, who had spent the afternoon charming Vincent in his study, walked out holding his hand. Traditionally, the Madam and Margaret would sit beside Vincent, but this time Claire sat next to him, with Margaret beside. Horror! Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, and there's a banquet at the palace. Prince Lance requested, and the Emperor decreed that first-rank officials' wives can attend. Don't embarrass us. The First Lady naturally wouldn't, but Margaret Seymour was only a concubine, and being allowed into the palace was a great favor. It was said to be due to Prince Lance's request, recognizing it as a favor for her daughter. Margaret Seymour was overjoyed, feeling certain this would succeed.
However, Vincent then said, on New Year's Eve, I will clarify the situation with the Emperor, so the Emperor can grant the marriage originally intended for Claire to Vincent and Prince Lance. What? Emily Crawford, sitting nearby, suddenly asked. Emily Crawford had always been obedient in front of Vincent, but now she couldn't hold back. Her rudeness pleased the First Lady, who scolded, How rude, interrupting adult conversations, what is this behavior? Emily felt very wronged. Prince Lance had clearly promised her she would become his consort, but now Vincent's words changed everything to Vincent Crawford. She had no idea what was happening. Vincent glanced at Margaret Seymour and said, Don't worry too much, Emily will naturally find a good match. Margaret Seymour grinned, saying, Thank you, Marquis. Though she smiled, she had her own plans. If Vincent was determined for Vincent Crawford, she must be equally determined for her precious daughter. Tomorrow, on New Year's Eve, she must secure something for her daughter, not letting anyone else take it away. During the meal, everyone had their own thoughts. Claire Crawford enjoyed her meal, the First Lady was in a good mood, but Vincent Crawford wasn't. She kept thinking about Jade Stone. Marrying Prince Lance would mean the end with Jade Stone, which was unthinkable. That night, Vincent Crawford quietly left the Marquis's residence to see Jade Stone. Despite the cold, she came pitifully, and Jade Stone was actually happy to see her. Brother Jade, what should I do? Father wants me to marry Prince Lance, what should I do? Vincent Crawford spoke pitifully, yet she didn't seem to want to stop it. This puzzled Jade Stone. Marry Prince Lance? Despite his efforts, Vincent still wanted to marry Prince Lance? So, you came to see me to say what? Jade Stone suppressed his anger, wanting to know what Vincent Crawford was thinking. Brother Jade, I want you to know that no matter whom I marry, I will always love you. Hearing this, Jade Stone lost all hope in her. She came in the snow just to tell him she was getting married. Jade Stone stood frozen in the snow, heart hollow. Vincent Crawford pitifully looked at him, saying, Brother Jade, give me some time, I will find a way. This felt like a joke to Jade Stone. Vincent Crawford said she couldn't stay long, as she sneaked out and had to return quickly. On the way back, Jade Stone silently escorted her to the Marquis's residence. Seeing his silence, Vincent Crawford thought he had forgiven her. Before leaving, she kissed him on the cheek. Of course, to Jade Stone, all of this seemed like a joke. That day, after Vincent Crawford left, Jade Stone stood alone in the snow for a long time, feeling empty and frozen. Claire Crawford finished her meal and was taken out by Prince Tan to see the snow, with Vincent's permission. Upon returning, from afar, she saw Jade Stone standing at the side entrance, covered in snow, almost like a snowman. Jade Stone? Claire Crawford was surprised. In such heavy snow, was he trying to freeze to death? Reluctantly, she took him to the Peach Blossom Pavilion, quietly bringing him in, instructing Mason Mount to rub him with snow and prepare medicine. It was pitiful how he was so infatuated in the heavy snow. When Jade Stone regained consciousness, Claire Crawford came to see him. If you want to be the first to freeze to death in the Marquis's residence, then you're useless. Jade Stone, you're not like this, you should soar in the sky, not lie in the dust. Chapter 57. The prince wants her heart. That day, Jade Stone left the Marquis's residence, seemingly carrying all his regrets with him. He realized that his love had completely died at that moment. If he couldn't find his love again, perhaps he could regain his dignity. Claire Crawford, I will remember your life-saving grace today, Jade Stone said earnestly, while Claire Crawford remained silent. On New Year's Eve, the atmosphere was incredibly lively. Prince Lance rarely visited the Marquis's residence, and this time he encountered Prince Eric Stuart. Previously, Eric Stuart would always defer to Prince Lance, but this time he didn't. Before, Prince Eric would follow Prince Lance around, but now he can stand up for himself, commented the advisor beside Prince Lance, disapproving of Eric Stuart's arrogance. However, there was no need for Eric Stuart to speak up because the Marquis had already supported him. Advisor 2, speak cautiously. All who come to my residence are esteemed guests and sons of the Emperor, the Marquis said, causing Prince Lance's expression to sour. At that moment, the three daughters of the Marquis's residence appeared. Vincent Crawford dressed as usual, her indifferent demeanor making her unapproachable.
Emily Crawford, on the other hand, imitated Claire Crawford's previous style. She wore her hair in a regal bun, adorned with a gold butterfly hairpin encrusted with gems. She held a light silk fan made of fragrant wood, dressed in a creamy white outfit with embroidered phoenix shoes. Her eyebrows and eyes bore some resemblance to Claire Crawford. However, Claire Crawford's attire that day was meticulously prepared by Eric Stewart, delivered to her the day before at the Peach Blossom Pavilion. She wore a silk cloak embroidered with plum blossoms, an amber-colored phoenix embroidered skirt, and a light blue silk cloak with gold-threaded flying phoenix embroidery. Her thick black hair was styled in a high cloud-like bun, adorned with a blue glass hairpin. She wore a gold bracelet set with pearls, a smoke blue embroidered sash with a pink sachet embroidered with lotus flowers, and pale purple silk shoes embroidered with lotus flowers, making her look as radiant as a hibiscus. Not only Prince Lance but even Eric Stewart almost couldn't contain himself. Vincent and Emily Crawford were immediately overshadowed by Claire Crawford's brilliance. Prince Lance initially wanted to extend his hand to support Claire Crawford, but Eric Stewart beat him to it. "Prince Lance, what are you doing? I only have this small request, don't compete with me. Your affairs with the second Miss Crawford are already the talk of the town. Let me take care of the third Miss Crawford," Eric Stewart said, his words seemingly innocuous but carrying a hint of irritation. The First Lady quickly pushed Vincent Crawford forward, hoping she would accompany Prince Lance in his grand carriage. However, Margaret Seymour was not foolish and knew that if she didn't act now, Emily Crawford would lose any chance. So, she nudged Emily Crawford forward, who then approached Prince Lance, saying, "Your Highness, let me serve you." The First Lady was taken aback to see Emily Crawford approaching Prince Lance, a situation she hadn't anticipated. "What does this have to do with you? Get down immediately," she exclaimed, but before she could finish, Prince Lance stopped Emily Crawford. "Some people are cold all day, unlike those who always smile," he remarked, leaving it unclear whether he referred to Vincent or Claire Crawford. In the end, Vincent and Emily Crawford rode in Prince Lance's carriage, basking in the glory, as Prince Lance was the Emperor's most favored son, and his carriage was indeed magnificent. However, Eric Stewart's carriage was also impressive, having been modified by Claire Crawford herself, complete with a fireplace and floral scents, ensuring that the two of them enjoyed their time inside. "After tonight, she will officially be my woman," Eric Stewart thought, knowing that some events would inevitably unfold. The Marquis would likely start currying favor with the Emperor this year. Eric Stewart saw this as a great advantage. Without lifting a finger, he had others doing the work for him. A true cunning fox, he pretended to be virtuous while leading the Marquis in circles. Initially, the Marquis was loyal to Prince Lance, even sending assassins to kill Eric Stewart. Now, Eric had managed to arrange for the Marquis's daughter to marry him. This fox was not only skilled in scheming but also adept in the art of power, having calculated everything precisely. The two of them cooperated seamlessly, appearing very close. "It's just a change of sleeping arrangements. The prince's focus should be on how to make the Emperor less wary of you, not on who becomes your woman," Claire Crawford remarked calmly, showing no emotional disturbance. Eric Stewart found her to be the most challenging woman to conquer. She was an expert at pretending, ruthless when needed, and could cry like a weeping pear blossom to gain sympathy, yet was more ruthless than anyone. Despite all they had been through together, she could calmly tell him it was all an act. Truly, there was no one more heartless than Claire Crawford. "Compared to dealing with my father and Prince Lance, I'm more curious about the clever heart beneath your fox-like exterior," Eric Stewart mused, intrigued by how Claire Crawford's feelings were calculated. "Want to dig out my heart? Feel free to try," Claire joked, her aura not losing to Eric Stewart's. Eric, resigned, handed her a piece of candied fruit, saying, "Why would I want to dig out your heart? I'm not a monster. I want your heart, but would the Crawford girl give it to me?" Claire accepted the treat, saying, "Then, Prince, you must try harder." Eric realized that his journey to win her over would be long and arduous. The carriage slowly stopped at the palace gates. Prince Lance was indeed in high spirits, surrounded by Vincent and Emily Crawford. In contrast, Eric Stewart seemed colder, but Claire gave him a bright smile, showing more harmony than in the carriage. Meanwhile, Princess Amelia was tasked with guarding the royal city, Jade Stone following closely behind. As their eyes met, Jade's feelings for Vincent had vanished.
Jade approached Claire instead. This is a protection charm from the Manhwa temple, for safety. Tonight is New Year's Eve, and the imperial astronomer predicts danger near the royal city.
Be cautious, little sister, Jade warned Claire, hinting at something significant.
Eric Stewart intercepted the charm, saying, "Guard Stone, you don't have intentions like Prince Lance, do you?
I saved you once, I'd be heartbroken if you repaid kindness with harm."
Jade smirked, glancing at Eric. "Don't worry, Prince.
I, Jade Stone, am not one to repay kindness with harm.
Today you call me Guard Stone, who knows, tomorrow we might be family."
Eric was puzzled. Claire noticed Jade's unusual behavior and held him back, saying, "Some things, if you can let go, might feel easier. After today, everything will be resolved, so don't worry too much."
Jade smiled. Resolved? That snowy night was the resolution.
"Don't worry, little sister, I know what I'm doing.
If I can take it up, I can put it down. In the Marquis's house, I only acknowledge you."
Claire was at a loss for words. She had saved Jade several times, initially to use him against the lady of the house. Later, upon learning of his background, she didn't want to make an enemy of him.
Eventually, she felt an inexplicable familiarity with him.
Perhaps it was because Jade's unrequited feelings mirrored those of Lance Stewart, and her feelings for her fiancé were filled with regret. Unexpectedly, she gained a brother who only recognized her.
Finally, Claire and Eric entered the palace.
In the main hall, their positions were opposite each other, with Vincent and Emily behind Claire. Although Vincent was a legitimate daughter, Claire's title of Princess Onping made her more prestigious. Chapter 58 Emily Crawford is pregnant during the banquet. The Emperor was in high spirits today, and it was rare for the Empress to join in the New Year's celebrations as well.
However, royal consort Florence appeared troubled.
Despite wearing the 5 Phoenix hairpin, her beauty couldn't compare to the Empress's smile. The Emperor's gaze was solely on the Empress, proving that the rumored harmony between them was true.
"Amelia keeps busy with those things, I've told her not to worry about it today, but she doesn't listen."
"Empress, don't be upset," the Emperor explained, knowing that Princess Amelia didn't want to attend.
She disliked such lively gatherings, and the Empress was present only out of respect for the Emperor.
The Empress smiled gently, saying, "Your Majesty is too serious. The girl is headstrong by nature, don't worry about it."
The Empress remained indifferent, neither surprised by the Emperor's attempts to please her nor causing him disappointment. Amidst the lively music and dance, just as Vincent was about to discuss his daughter's marriage, an incident occurred with Emily Crawford.
She suddenly began vomiting uncontrollably, drawing everyone's attention. Vincent had to swallow his words as all eyes turned to Emily Crawford. Claire Crawford, closest to Emily, couldn't stand by idly and exclaimed, "Oh, dear sister, what's wrong?
Quickly, call the royal physician." Upon hearing this, Eric Stewart promptly ordered, "Why are you still standing there? Go fetch physician Jiang immediately, don't delay." A palace maid quickly left to summon help. Emily Crawford's continuous vomiting was distressing, and such an incident was unexpected at a banquet.
Typically, if someone fell ill without significant status, it wouldn't be made public. However, Emily Crawford, being Vincent's daughter and with Claire's assistance, brought physician Jiang swiftly to the scene. In front of everyone, physician Jiang hesitated to speak after examining Emily.
"Physician Jiang, how is Vincent's daughter?" the Emperor asked, displeased.
The Emperor was aware Vincent intended to act today, but he didn't expect the first move to come from Emily Crawford, Vincent's eldest daughter. Vincent's actions were not entirely satisfactory to the Emperor, but given Vincent's substantial power, the Emperor had to maintain a good relationship and couldn't offend him. Although aware of Vincent's intentions to align with Prince Lance and King Tan, the Emperor pretended ignorance. As for Prince Lance, the Emperor was genuinely surprised by Vincent's significant sacrifice in attempting to win over King Tan as well.
"Your Majesty, this situation, I need to diagnose again," physician Jiang said, aware that a wrong word could cost him dearly. This was Vincent's eldest daughter, and any conclusion couldn't be made lightly. After multiple diagnoses, he nervously
reported to the Emperor, "Your Majesty, Vincent's eldest daughter is not ill, she is expecting."
"Expecting?" As the most esteemed physician in the Imperial Medical Institute, physician John's confirmation meant it was certain.
However, the issue was that Emily Crawford was still unmarried, raising the question of the child's paternity. Vincent's face turned grim. He had planned everything meticulously but hadn't anticipated Emily's situation at this moment, which felt like a slap in the face. Margaret Seymour, who had been unnoticed until now, suddenly spoke up.
"My daughter, how did you end up pregnant?" Margaret Seymour wasn't afraid of embarrassment and wanted a resolution today.
As Margaret caused a scene, everyone watched Vincent's predicament unfold.
Claire Crawford hurriedly intervened to stop Margaret's outburst, saying, "Dear sister, whose child is this? Father is here, and so are the Emperor and Empress. Speak up, and justice will be served." Claire's words were clear, urging Emily to reveal the child's father. Continuing the commotion would benefit no one. Emily then tearfully looked towards Prince Lance.
Vincent rubbed his temples, realizing that Emily had ruined what could have been a perfect plan. Prince Lance's face was also not looking good, but since it was his doing, he refused to admit it now. Poor Emily Crawford looked at Claire Crawford, held her hand, and said with grievance, It's Prince Lance's child, the baby in my womb is Prince Lance's child." With these words, Prince Lance's reputation as a scoundrel was confirmed. On one hand, he was engaged to Claire Crawford, and on the other, he was entangled with Vincent Crawford. The result? All three daughters of Vincent were played with by Prince Lance. Ultimately, Emily Crawford, Vincent's eldest daughter, was pregnant, and with Prince Lance's child no less. The Emperor, sitting high above, looked grim, having never seen such an incompetent son. He had always secretly supported Prince Lance, hoping he would make some effort, and the result? His son had indeed made an effort. Emily Crawford cried bitterly, and Margaret Seymour beside her also wept like a rain-soaked pear blossom, deeply aggrieved. At this moment, everyone was waiting for the Emperor and Prince Lance to speak. Meanwhile, Claire Crawford and Eric Stewart exchanged glances. Next, it was Claire Crawford's stage. She didn't care who won or lost between Vincent and Emily Crawford, her concern was whether she could sever all ties with Prince Lance. That was Claire Crawford's goal today. So, when Claire Crawford released Emily Crawford's hand, as if out of deep sisterly affection, seeing Emily wronged, she directly charged out of the crowd to confront Prince Lance. Eric Stewart stood in front, seemingly blocking Claire Crawford, but in reality, clearing a path for her to Prince Lance. Thus, with reddened eyes, Claire Crawford approached Prince Lance and slapped him. It wasn't the first time Claire Crawford hit Prince Lance, but doing so in front of the Emperor and Empress, and so many officials, made her the first. "Prince Lance, you are engaged to me, yet you entangle yourself with my second sister, and now you have impregnated my eldest sister. Do you have nothing to say?" She pressed, applying pressure. Claire Crawford executed her plan brilliantly. Eric Stewart, watching from the side, even felt sorry for Prince Lance. Being questioned so forcefully in front of everyone, anyone else would have had to obediently await the Emperor's decision. But Claire Crawford was different. She dared to confront Prince Lance under such heavy pressure. Thanks to Claire Crawford's uproar, Vincent felt slightly more relieved, having time to ponder how to handle today's farce. Prince Lance was rendered speechless, his face pale. Seeing Prince Lance at a loss for words, Claire Crawford moved through the crowd, glanced at Vincent, nodded, and then knelt before the Emperor. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, I request the annulment of my engagement to Prince Lance. Although my eldest sister is at fault, she carries Prince Lance's child. I hope Your Majesty will consider the royal bloodline and allow my eldest sister to marry Prince Lance. I struck Prince Lance today and am willing to accept punishment." Claire Crawford took responsibility for everything, both good and bad. Although the Emperor was angry, he admired Claire Crawford's intelligence. Initially, he intended to make Emily Crawford a concubine and Claire Crawford the main consort, which would have thwarted Vincent's plans. But now, with Claire Crawford pleading in front of everyone, he found it hard to refuse. Vincent also knelt before the Emperor. "Your Majesty, I failed to teach my daughter properly, leading to such a mistake. I hope Your Majesty will consider the royal bloodline, annul the engagement between Prince Lance and Claire, and allow my eldest daughter to marry Prince Lance." In any case, the family's reputation was already damaged.
If today's matter couldn't be resolved, Emily Crawford could only become Prince Lance's concubine, and Vincent Crawford might not become Prince Lance's consort.
Vincent knew the emperor would likely not grant him any favors in the future. Today, he could only hope for success in this matter. One of his daughters must become Prince Lance's consort to make all his scheming worthwhile. Chapter 59, Proposal to Princess Serena. This matter, ultimately, is Prince Lance's fault, the emperor declared, agreeing with Vincent's words.
The marriage between Princess Serena and Prince Lance will be changed to Vincent's eldest daughter. After today's court session, Prince Lance will stay behind.
The emperor's face was devoid of its usual glory, and this was the only way to handle the situation.
Father and son knelt humbly on the ground, allowing the emperor to suppress his yet-to-erupt anger. Father, Eric Stuart, watched the scene unfold. He had never known Claire Crawford could act so boldly and skillfully.
One must remember, when the emperor is enraged, blood flows like rivers. Claire Crawford forced the emperor into a corner, compelling him to agree, though it might mean future unrest for her. Thus, Eric Stuart took the risk of offending the emperor, stepping forward and kneeling before him.
Father, I am deeply in love with Princess Serena. I wish to marry her and hope you will grant this union.
If my wish is fulfilled, I vow to have only Princess Serena by my side from now on. Claire Crawford, newly freed from her ties with Prince Lance, found herself becoming the subject of Prince Quin's affections.
The crowd was thoroughly entertained by the day's events. Unfazed by the emperor's potential wrath, Eric Stuart knelt resolutely.
Claire Crawford hadn't expected Eric Stuart to challenge the emperor at such a time, but his words were heartfelt. After being hurt by Prince Lance, Claire Crawford was now being consoled by Prince Quin, putting the emperor in a difficult position.
Claire Crawford, showing her own courage, knelt as well. Your Majesty, I am willing to marry Prince Quin and believe he will treat me well. In the future, I will join him in honoring you.
Claire Crawford's words carried a hint of flattery. The emperor did not favor Prince Quin, and regardless of what Prince Quin did, the emperor was displeased. Yet, as Prince Quin was his son, and Claire Crawford would become his daughter-in-law, her words of honoring him together with Prince Quin soothed the emperor's wounded heart somewhat. Vincent, it seems your third daughter is destined for the royal family.
If you have no objections, considering Prince Lance's offense towards Princess Serena, I will grant the marriage to Prince Quin. Choose an auspicious day and prepare for the wedding.
The emperor was satisfied with Claire Crawford, having valued her since their first meeting.
Today, he confirmed the marriage between Claire Crawford and Prince Quin, concluding the farce of New Year's Eve. The emperor did not detain Eric Stuart or Vincent but kept Prince Lance behind. As Claire Crawford left, she approached Prince Lance and said calmly, "Take care, Prince Lance."
Initially, Prince Lance didn't understand what Claire Crawford meant by take care until he was detained and punished with 50 lashes by the emperor. Only then did he grasp the meaning behind her words.
In the carriage, Claire Crawford and Eric Stuart were more at ease.
Now officially betrothed by the emperor, they were a couple envied by many.
Eric Stuart was attentive to Claire Crawford, sparking jealousy among many noble women.
If Prince Quin keeps smiling like that, his jaw might hurt by tonight, Claire Crawford remarked. In the grand hall, she had been formidable, her eyes brimming with emotion as she assisted Eric Stuart in proposing. Yet, once in the carriage, she seemed like a different person, baffling Eric Stuart.
"We're about to be married, aren't you happy?" Eric Stuart asked.
He had never anticipated anything as much as this. As a child, he had dreamed of going to war, achieving great victories, and earning the emperor's recognition, only to be disappointed. This time, he longed for the auspicious day when Claire Crawford would become his bride.
Could he be disappointed again? I've already said we're partners.
I help Prince Quin achieve what he wants, and he grants me freedom.
Don't forget that. Claire Crawford's words left Eric Stuart's passionate heart cold.
He stared at her for a long time, unsure of what to say next.
Nodding, he let out a bitter laugh. I refuse to believe I can lose a second time.
7 Moon stopped the carriage. With that, Claire Crawford watched as Eric Stuart, seemingly angry without reason, exited the carriage.
Claire Crawford watched Eric Stuart stubbornly walk away, smiling with a perplexing expression.
This was the first time she had seen Eric Stuart act so stubbornly, like a little girl throwing a tantrum. Saying he would leave the carriage and leaving just like that. In her past life, she hadn't paid attention to what Lance Stewart looked like when he was angry, nor had she observed what kind of person he was in daily life. But now, she couldn't help but compare. Sometimes, Claire Crawford was very clear Eric Stuart was not Lance Stewart, and she was no longer the war god of her previous life. Yet, she still uncontrollably compared the two. She only wanted to help Eric Stuart obtain what he desired and then leave on her own accord. She wasn't thinking of treating him as someone else, nor did she want to make such comparisons. One mistake in the past had been her regret, but she absolutely could not make the same mistake twice. Eric Stuart sulked as he made his way back to the Qin prince's residence, with Seven Moon trailing behind him, not daring to say a word. To be able to anger his master to this extent, Claire Crawford was undoubtedly the first. Have I not treated her well? Am I not handsome enough, or am I unworthy of her, for her to treat me this way? Eric Stuart grumbled about Claire Crawford, while Seven Moon remained silent. Eric Stuart continued to complain to himself for half the day before finding it pointless. Seven Moon, standing there like a block of wood, didn't even try to console him. Seven Moon, let me ask you, what do you think of that Crawford girl? Eric Stuart asked seriously, causing Seven Moon to feel uneasy. A wrong answer would surely result in punishment. After careful thought, he cautiously replied, Your Highness, you've never cared about anyone like this before. They say the one who falls in love first must pay the price. Miss Crawford is unlike others, ordinary means cannot sway her. However, over time, feelings may develop, and Your Highness will surely achieve your wish. Some people don't fall in love at first sight but grow feelings over time. Eric Stuart took a deep breath and stared at the sky for a long while. That girl had changed so much since meeting him, it was definitely not love at first sight. However, after investigating thoroughly, it was confirmed that Claire Crawford had no connections with any other man. Even so, Eric Stuart still didn't know who Claire Crawford held in her heart, but it was undoubtedly a man. Thinking it over again and again, he suddenly turned around and headed in the opposite direction. Your Highness, where are you going? The prince's residence is this way, Seven Moon said, following behind. Seeing Eric Stuart turn back, he wondered where his master was heading now. Eric Stuart didn't answer, and Seven Moon didn't dare ask further. At last, he realized where his master was heading. The carriage slowly arrived at the Marquis residence. Claire Crawford had taken a detour before returning to the Marquis residence, and by now, the household was surely in an uproar. Indeed, as soon as she entered Willow Green, she hurried to Claire Crawford's side. Before even stepping into the Peach Blossom Pavilion, she was stopped at the door. My lady, you've finally returned. The Marquis is furious and has ordered you to go to the main hall immediately upon your return. I heard Margaret Seymour was beaten by the Marquis, and the eldest young lady has been punished to kneel on the ground. Claire Crawford wasn't surprised. Vincent had been holding back his anger the entire way. If he didn't vent it, no one would get any sleep tonight. Margaret Seymour and Emily Crawford had conspired to deceive Vincent. Claire Crawford knew he would be enraged, so she had deliberately taken a detour on her way back, yet it still wasn't enough to calm him. Though it wasn't directly related to her, she had to step in and pacify the situation. Willow Green, I'll entrust you with a task. Go and handle it immediately, Claire Crawford whispered something into Willow Green's ear before heading to the main hall. The wedding date had been set, and once she entered the Prince of Qin's residence, the good days ahead would likely be over. The harmonious image of a dutiful daughter and a loving father would no longer be possible. By the time Claire Crawford arrived, Margaret Seymour's face was already swollen from being beaten. She was tightly bound and kneeling on the ground, crying miserably. It was evident that the First Madam had added fuel to the fire. Father, I explained things to His Highness, the Prince of Qin, on the way here, which caused some delay. Please don't be angry. As for today's incident, it won't spread outside. I've already asked His Highness to warn those who like to gossip, ensuring this matter won't get out, Claire Crawford said, helping Vincent resolve the potential troubles ahead. Vincent had grown increasingly fond of this daughter of his. Claire, if it weren't for you today,
our entire household might have been ruined by those two. Vincent said, his anger still not subsiding as he glared fiercely at Margaret Seymour. The first madam was livid. Regardless of Margaret Seymour's fate, Emily Crawford had already become Prince Lance's consort. Her beloved daughter, Vincent Crawford, had gained nothing. How could she swallow this humiliation? Marquis, I told you before that Margaret Seymour, this vile woman, would bring disaster to our family, but you didn't believe me. Now, do you see? Everyone outside is laughing at us. How is Vincent supposed to live with this shame? The first madam wept bitterly. Vincent Crawford had missed the chance to become Prince Lance's consort, and now Emily Crawford had risen to power. How could things turn out this way? Could Emily Crawford truly be pregnant? Although imperial physician Zhang had confirmed it, the first madam still harbored doubts. However, her priority now was to take advantage of Vincent's anger to deal with Margaret Seymour. Enough! Claire has already said that the Prince of Qin will handle the aftermath. Prince Lance won't allow anyone to spread rumors. Who would dare offend the royal family's dignity? Who would dare provoke His Majesty? Vincent shot a glance at Margaret Seymour, feeling an indescribable discomfort in his heart. But since the matter was settled, Vincent's current concern was whether Vincent Crawford would rekindle her past relationship with Jade Stone. The eldest daughter of the family, no matter who she is with, cannot be with Jade Stone. What he is worried about is likely the same thing the Emperor intends to do. Previously, the Emperor kept Jade Stone at the residence, perhaps already anticipating this day. Father, regarding Jade Stone, His Highness Prince Qin and I have already issued a warning. For now, you can rest assured. However, if you have other plans for the second sister, it's best to act quickly, Claire Crawford whispered to Vincent. Vincent Crawford should now be arranged into the position that he had once reserved for Emily Crawford. No matter who she marries, it will not be an ideal match. But in Vincent's eyes, anyone would be better than Jade Stone. You've been thoughtful, Vincent patted Claire Crawford's shoulder. At that moment, Willow Green led Madame Lai into the room. This time, Claire Crawford could be considered to have made a contribution. Moving forward, much will depend on the efforts of Claire Crawford and Prince Qin. As for Prince Lance, having been schemed against by Emily Crawford in such a way, even if Emily becomes his consort, there will be no joy in it. Let alone the possibility of mending relations with Vincent as they once were in the short term. Vincent still needs to repair his relationship with Prince Lance. However, Claire Crawford is different. Both she and Prince Qin can be utilized by Vincent. Of course, this was Vincent's thought, and it was exactly what Claire Crawford wanted Vincent to think. My lord, Madame Lai wishes to speak with you, Willow Green announced as she brought Madame Lai in. Margaret Seymour, upon seeing her, was startled. However, Claire Crawford remained calm. Since she had kept Madame Lai, she had already planned against Margaret Seymour. Margaret Seymour believed Madame Lai was her pawn, but in reality, she was the knife that would end her. Madame Lai approached Vincent and suddenly knelt down before speaking. My lord, the third young lady, it is I, the old servant, who wronged young Lady Stuart. Years ago, I knew Margaret Seymour poisoned young Lady Stuart, but Margaret Seymour paid me to keep silent. Madame Lai, kneeling on the ground, recounted everything from those years, including how Margaret Seymour schemed against young Lady Stuart, and also about the child. The lady of the house was indeed smart. Years had passed, and Madame Lai could accuse Margaret Seymour but not the lady of the house. Back then, she merely assisted Margaret Seymour in secret. The poisoning plot was still Margaret Seymour's doing. My lord, Beatrice Stuart was obedient back then, and she was pregnant, yet she was harmed by that woman. She truly cannot be forgiven. The lady of the house took this opportunity to act righteously, and Claire Crawford naturally did not cause any disturbance. She simply shed tears quietly, feeling wronged, as the truth of her mother's death was revealed. Vincent, feeling guilty, had to stand up for Claire Crawford. But unexpectedly, Eric Stuart arrived and overheard the scene. Lord Crawford, I just returned from the Ministry of War's residence, initially to have them address the rumors spreading outside and warn everyone, but seeing my fiancé being wronged like this, I cannot swallow this anger. Eric Stuart was always carefree, somewhat like a rogue, but he genuinely cared for Claire Crawford. However, Vincent could understand that today everything was ruined by Margaret Seymour's plan. Now, the uproar about Margaret Seymour causing Beatrice Stewart's death years ago, especially when Beatrice was pregnant, has resurfaced. No matter how much Vincent wanted things to settle quietly, Margaret Seymour had stirred a hornet's nest, and he needed Claire Crawford's agreement for a gentle resolution. After all, Claire Crawford was far more important than Margaret Seymour. Claire, you know this matter can't be decided in a moment. I promise to help you investigate thoroughly and bring justice for your mother, alright? Vincent said, and Claire Crawford, naturally, wasn't in a rush. She was seeking revenge for the original owner of her body, and there was no need to hurry. Margaret Seymour was destined to lose and pay for Beatrice Stewart's life. Thank you, Father. I'll excuse myself to rest now, I'm a bit tired today. Claire Crawford, with tears in her eyes, was comforted by Vincent, and Eric Stewart accompanied her to the Plum Blossom Pavilion. Eric Stewart was ready to wipe Claire Crawford's tears with a handkerchief, but he noticed her sorrowful expression had vanished, and she was calmly eating sweet white fungus soup freshly made at the pavilion. Is she not sad? Claire Crawford didn't seem to be grieving. But she had orchestrated such a grand act, and Eric Stewart could see she was seeking revenge. Could she endure for so many years without any real sorrow? Is His Highness the Prince no longer angry? Claire Crawford asked while eating, seemingly genuinely hungry. She hadn't eaten much at the banquet and had to perform a dramatic scene at home, so she was enjoying her meal. Sometimes, I really don't understand how you handle your emotions, Eric Stewart said after hesitating for a while. Claire Crawford glanced at him while holding the half-finished bowl of soup. Some things she truly couldn't explain. She had taken over this body to avenge the original owner, and those who harmed Lady Stewart years ago would not be spared. This was her promise to the original owner. Collaborating with Eric Stewart was also because of his resemblance to her former fiancé, but she had no affection for Beatrice Stewart or Eric Stewart. However, she couldn't clearly explain this to Eric Stewart. Was this why he called her cold-hearted? If His Highness regrets it, there's still time to back out, Claire Crawford said seriously, putting down her finished bowl and looking at Eric Stewart. He didn't expect his words to provoke such a strong reaction from her. Regret? He didn't know what regret meant. I will marry you honorably into the prince's household, Miss Crawford. Whether we become intimate as husband and wife or remain partners as you say, you must be honest with me. Whatever you plan or aim to do, you must tell me, Eric Stewart declared, showing no regret, wanting to understand Claire Crawford's true feelings and intentions. All right, Claire Crawford nodded, indicating she understood. She stood up, feeling tired and ready to rest. But as she turned, she saw Eric Stewart had finished the remaining half of her soup, causing her to frown. Chapter 61, The Wedding Dress and Dowry. Afterward, Claire Crawford quietly went out for a trip. Eric Stewart came to the Marquis residence several times but didn't meet her until half a month later when Claire returned. It was said that Eric Stewart had become quite famous throughout the capital. He had caused a commotion at Phoenix Pavilion, the most renowned tailor shop in the capital, forcing Madame Phoenix, who hadn't crafted a wedding dress in years, to make one for him. Originally, the palace had prepared a wedding dress, but Eric Stewart was reportedly dissatisfied. This incident became widely known, and Willow Green eagerly recounted it to Claire Crawford. Miss, His Highness Prince Tan is truly more considerate than His Highness Prince Lance. In my opinion, Prince Tan treats you the best, Willow Green chattered endlessly, but Claire Crawford seemed uninterested. She felt indifferent about the grand wedding, as it was merely a collaboration. Currently, the entire residence was filled with a festive atmosphere, largely due to Prince Lance. Emily Crawford was about to marry Prince Lance and become his consort, which was more favored than her position as Prince Tan's consort. However, Marquis Crawford comforted her, saying that Prince Lance's betrothal gifts were prepared by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, following royal protocol. Meanwhile, Prince Tan's gifts were also prepared by the ministry but were somewhat modest due to lacking a powerful family background like royal consort Florence. Claire Crawford understood but was surprised by Eric Stewart's actions. How do you know Prince Tan treats me well? Claire asked, slightly bored, occasionally teasing Willow Green, who praised Eric Stewart to the skies. Claire smiled and asked. Willow Green earnestly replied, "Every time His Highness Prince Lance sends something, it's lavish but impractical, though extremely valuable, they serve no real purpose."
But His Highness Prince Tan is different. Even if they are small items, they are either something amusing, something you like to eat, or something useful. Previously, he sent ginseng, which was used to make soup for you when you had a cold. Well, Claire Crawford found it hard to argue with that. Unexpectedly, while they were still talking, Marquis Crawford sent someone over, saying that Eric Stewart had brought the wedding dress, and the chest was in the front hall.
Claire Crawford arrived, finding Vincent Crawford and Emily Crawford in the foyer.
The matron was filled with envy as she watched Claire take out a wedding dress from the chest. The dress was a vibrant red, with a smooth velvet texture.
The bright red velvet was interwoven with shimmering golden threads, making the entire outfit dazzling.
The outer coat was a red-sleeved garment made from South Sea brocade, thin as a cicada's wing, with a golden phoenix embroidered on it. As a princess, Claire Crawford had the right to wear the phoenix motif. The veil was equally impressive, adorned with lifelike mandarin ducks and hundreds of genuine pearls. The phoenix crown was particularly noteworthy, clearly not something that could be crafted in a few days. It featured gemstones, gold thread borders, and a carved phoenix image, all requiring time and effort, indicating that Eric Stewart had invested considerable thought into marrying Claire Crawford. Claire stood by, observing for a while. The wedding dress was new, and the phoenix crown had been prepared in advance, unmistakably crafted by skilled artisans, not something an ordinary person could produce. "Madam, you should let go first. We need to see if Claire is satisfied with these," Eric Stewart remarked, aware of the matron's jealousy, but knowing she could only feel envious.
Here, everything revolved around Claire Crawford. The matron awkwardly stepped aside, realizing that Claire's review would be the same as hers.
"The size is clearly for Claire. Prince Lance has a keen eye," the matron commented, implying that Claire, like Emily Crawford who had been with Prince Lance, might have been intimate with Eric Stewart.
However, Claire smiled and replied, "If Prince Lance didn't have such discernment, he wouldn't be himself." The matron stood awkwardly aside, understanding there was no need to antagonize Claire Crawford now. Even if she questioned Claire's purity, nothing could change the outcome.
"Willow Green, take these to the Peach Blossom Pavilion." "Madam, if you have no further instructions, I shall take my leave," Claire said, maintaining politeness but keeping a distance from the matron.
After Claire left, the matron showed her displeasure, muttering, "What arrogance! Isn't he just an unloved prince? What good is external splendor?"
Yet, she regretted that Emily Crawford had taken her daughter's place as Prince Lance's consort. Pregnant in watching everything unfold, Emily Crawford felt envious but had learned to endure. After all, Margaret Seymour was still not released, currently under house arrest at Maple Woods Court by order of the Crawford patriarch. Emily's urgent task was to marry into Prince Lance's household and become his consort, hoping to rescue her mother. Before achieving that, Emily Crawford would not argue or have conflicts with anyone. Claire Crawford returned to Peach Blossom Pavilion, while Willow Green was enamored with the Phoenix Crown wedding dress, but Claire Crawford showed no reaction.
She didn't even inquire about it.
Eric Stewart initially smiled, anticipating surprise and joy from others, but ended up deeply disappointed.
"I understand now, does this not even move the heart of the Crawfords girl?"
He wasn't angry, no matter how surprised or delighted others were. If Claire Crawford didn't smile, it meant nothing.
Claire Crawford said nothing, nor did she express dissatisfaction.
Eric Stewart brought pastries every time he visited, and Claire Crawford ate them each time, indicating her liking.
"If the prince likes to flaunt, treating me well is only right, isn't it?
If I were to be gleeful in the hall, the First Lady might want to devour me alive." Originally, the First Lady was already suppressing her anger, and before leaving the Marquis's residence, Claire Crawford wanted no entanglements with her.
Revenge didn't necessarily have to happen at the Marquis's residence.
This explanation made Eric Stewart feel that Claire Crawford was sensible, even considering his feelings, not bad at all. While they were talking, Willow Green brought in something. Claire Crawford had no reaction, and Willow Green placed the item in front of Eric Stewart.
"What is this?"
Eric Stewart was curious about the ordinary-looking box. If it was from Claire Crawford, it surely wasn't something trivial.
A dowry. Claire Crawford didn't expect much from the Marquis's residence's dowry, finding nothing worth seeing, but she prepared a special dowry for Eric Stuart. Eric Stuart was extremely surprised and hurriedly opened it. Inside was a small jade green bottle containing a tiny insect. Eric Stuart, who feared nothing on the battlefield, was so terrified that he almost dropped the insect. "Are you trying to scare me, knowing I'm afraid of insects?" Eric Stuart trembled, cold sweat breaking out. Claire Crawford couldn't stop laughing. Her dowry was truly one of a kind. If the prince fears insects, that's unfortunate. "I specially went to the southern region for half a month to find this phoenix goo, which is priceless. It took me 3 days to find it on a cliff full of phoenix flowers." The phoenix goo, capable of suppressing all diseases and resisting poisons, was something Claire Crawford once encountered during a mission in the southern region. Bitten by a venomous insect, she believed that within 100 meters of a deadly creature, there must be an antidote. Spotting the phoenix goo among the flowers, she recalled reading about it in ancient medical texts. Consuming it saved her life. Thus, Claire Crawford personally ventured to the southern region, risking another venomous bite to retrieve the phoenix goo. "Eric Stuart, whether we are husband and wife or partners, we must be honest. Have you been honest with me?" Claire Crawford's words pierced deeply. Eric Stuart was speechless for a long time. He indeed hadn't been truthful, not revealing everything about himself to Claire Crawford, leading to her reproach and questioning today. Her questioning touched on the ultimate truth Eric Stuart had hidden from everyone, but if he spoke, it would no longer be a secret. Chapter 62, The Betrothal Gift. "Alright, if you don't want to speak, then I will," Claire Crawford said, holding a small bottle that had been specially treated to keep the phoenix goo worm alive. She stood before Eric Stuart with a smile on her face, but behind that smile was a hint of hesitation. Eric Stuart didn't fully trust her, otherwise, he wouldn't have hidden the fact that he was poisoned. He acted as if nothing was wrong, but he only ate cold food. For example, he ate leftover cakes, snacks, and plain porridge with vegetables from her. Even when dining at the Peach Blossom Pavilion, he would tease her for a while, waiting for the food to cool before eating. He thought these actions could conceal his condition, and Claire Crawford never mentioned it, but that didn't mean she didn't notice. Claire Crawford never spoke about it, but she understood everything. Eric Stuart grinned before saying, "The poison in me is a rare toxin from the snow mountains of Tang Na, the cold fireworm. Although it shortens my lifespan, living into my 40s shouldn't be a problem." Claire Crawford wasn't interested in these details, she wanted to know something else. She opened the small bottle, and the active little worm inside almost crawled out. Eric Stuart was so frightened that he dashed to the door, staring at the worm in Claire Crawford's hand, trembling all over. He seemed genuinely terrified. "Eric Stuart, this is the phoenix goo. The phoenix worm can suppress the cold fireworm inside you. With me here, I guarantee the cold fireworm won't act up," Claire Crawford said, genuinely concerned for Eric Stuart and willing to do anything for him. However, whether Eric Stuart could trust her was another matter. The urgent task was to get Eric Stuart to swallow the phoenix goo. Yet, judging by Eric Stuart's terrified demeanor, it seemed impossible for him to eat it. "What do you want to do?" Eric Stuart asked, as Claire Crawford held the little worm in her hand, advancing toward him step by step. This time, Eric Stuart truly wanted to flee. As soon as he saw Claire Crawford approaching with the worm, he felt paralyzed, sensing something amiss. He turned to run, but unfortunately for him, Claire Crawford had already anticipated his next move. She blocked him at the door and pulled him toward the wall. Claire Crawford cornered him, and Willow Green walked in, thinking she had witnessed something inappropriate. "Ah, sorry, miss, your highness, I'll just leave," Willow Green quickly retreated. Eric Stuart's only hope for rescue had vanished. "Let's discuss this calmly, no need for force," Eric Stuart pleaded, not afraid of the worm itself, just disgusted by it. Yes, he was merely disgusted by the worm. "What are you afraid of? I doubt His Highness will swallow it willingly, so why don't we choose a less daunting method?" Claire Crawford seemed patient, negotiating with Eric Stuart. Why did Eric Stuart feel something was off? He watched as Claire Crawford pulled him over, pressed him into a chair, cut his hand, and let the repulsive little worm crawl into him. "Did you let this disgusting little parasite enter my body?" Eric Stuart almost stood up,
expressing his disdain for the phoenix goo with a look of disgust.
Prince Eric, don't be so ungrateful.
It's protecting you from the cold fire parasite inside your body, someone remarked. Eric searched his body but couldn't find the phoenix goo. It seemed to have disappeared, entering through his arm and slowly spreading inside him.
What could Eric say?
No matter how much he disliked it, he had to keep his mouth shut, or who knows what torment he might face.
Claire Crawford's betrothal gift was truly unique.
Because of the phoenix goo, Eric lingered at the Peach Blossom Pavilion, constantly wanting to eat this or that, causing Willow Green considerable distress.
Prince Eric, what exactly do you want to eat? Willow Green prepared several snacks, but Eric refused them, acting as if he were being wronged. In Willow Green's heart, wasn't it her lady who was truly wronged? Prince Eric, these rose pastries are delicious. Would you like to try one?
Willow Green patiently persuaded Eric, but he arrogantly refused.
I won't eat. I refuse.
Eric stayed at the Peach Blossom Pavilion, unwilling to leave, leaving Willow Green unsure of what to say.
Eat or don't, it's up to you.
Willow Green, don't bother with him. Claire Crawford finally lost her patience. If this continued, she felt she might have to forcibly remove him. Willow Green watched as Eric devoured 3 rose pastries.
No matter how delicious, was it really necessary to act like this?
Despite her efforts to persuade him for so long, it only took a single word from her lady to make him eat. Just as Claire Crawford was about to take action to send him away, the head lady sent someone to deliver a message. Third Miss, the Marquis and the head lady are waiting for you in the front hall, and Prince Eric is there too, so. Springhope had just finished speaking when Eric's steward instructed, let's go, I will accompany you. In the main hall, the matron was truly stunned as she looked at a room and a courtyard filled with large trunks.
Lord Crawford was examining the list of betrothal gifts sent by Prince Quin's envoy.
Not to mention the large trunks outside, even the list itself was exquisitely crafted, with the cat's eye stones on it being extremely precious. The items listed left Lord Crawford astonished. From agarwood wishful scepters to red agate ornaments, jade vases, rare paintings, priceless treasures to everyday items, clothes, and more, everything from fox fur coats to brocades, and clothing for all seasons were meticulously prepared. The most astonishing part was that Eric's steward even arranged for Claire Crawford to have maids, servants, and guards, all from Prince Quin's household. This was not taken from the national treasury or the royal family, but from Prince Quin's private funds, leaving even the emperor with nothing to say. Even a princess might not receive such attention, let alone Claire Crawford, who was just a secondary daughter. The matron was now extremely surprised, having thought that Prince Lance was the best prospect, but unexpectedly, Prince Lance showed no concern and did not even appear, whereas Eric's steward held Claire Crawford in high regard.
Lord, with so many betrothal gifts, Claire's status might be overwhelming.
The matron was clearly envious, as her own daughter, being the legitimate one, had not yet married.
How could Claire Crawford shine so brightly now? Why?
The matron felt this situation was very unfavorable and could not allow Claire Crawford to outshine her daughter in the future. But just as the matron finished speaking, Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford entered the main hall.
Does the matron find this unfavorable?
Eric Stewart, except for Lord Crawford, was not friendly to anyone else.
Moreover, he was a prince, even if not favored, still the emperor's son, so what did the matron amount to? After Eric Stewart spoke, the matron hurriedly said, Prince Quin, are you not leaving yet? Eric Stewart coldly smiled at the matron, envious, perhaps?
Envy was only natural, after all, Vincent Crawford's marriage was still uncertain. However, anyone who dared to meddle in his marriage plans today would not get past him. Father, your daughter and Prince Quin are in harmony.
Prince Quin respects you and cherishes your daughter. This is a respect for the entire household.
Even if it shortens my life, for you, for the household, I am willing. Claire Crawford's words were heartfelt. The matron's face turned pale, not expecting Claire Crawford to speak so eloquently now.
Lord Crawford, of course, understood the implication.
Now, Eric Stewart was backing Claire Crawford, supporting her throughout the entire capital. Claire Crawford was his daughter, and if she could gain fame, it would benefit him as well, so why oppose it? Women's words should not be taken seriously. Now leave. Lord Crawford glanced at the matron, then smiled and patted Claire Crawford's shoulder, as well as Eric Stewart's. These betrothal gifts, even more generous than those for a princess, showed that Eric Stewart truly cared for Claire Crawford. Lord Crawford simply believed that Claire Crawford had the ability and means to hold Eric Stewart in her grasp, just as she did with him, so what was there to object to? Chapter 63, Revenge on Margaret Seymour. The matriarch was quite furious. However, Eric Stewart was the Prince of Qin, and the Marquis Crawford valued him highly. If she said anything, she risked offending others. This situation, however, favored Claire Crawford. Nonetheless, it did bring some embarrassment to Emily Crawford, which slightly appeased the matriarch. As for Margaret Seymour, she was still under house arrest at Maple Woods Court, unable to leave and filled with daily anxiety. "Claire, now that you can be so intimate with the Prince of Qin, your father can rest assured," said Marquis Crawford. He knew that as long as the prince was obedient, everything would be fine. Seeing the gifts today confirmed that Eric Stewart, as rumored, had a hidden treasure. Thus, Marquis Crawford felt confident in his choice of Eric Stewart. Whether for future use or other purposes, it would be convenient. For several days, Eric Stewart stayed at Claire Crawford's Peach Blossom Pavilion, claiming to be nurturing their relationship. However, Claire treated him as invisible, focusing on her own tasks and ignoring him. In the herb room, 3 days before the grand wedding, Claire Crawford concocted a clear liquid and held it in her hand. As soon as she stepped out, Eric Stewart followed her. "Going to see Margaret Seymour?" Eric Stewart seemed to have read Claire Crawford's mind, acting like he knew her every thought. Surprised, Claire listened as he smugly explained his reasoning. "You've been in the herb room every day, and with the wedding in 3 days, the Emperor has decreed that I, along with Prince Lance, will welcome the daughter of Marquis Crawford. If Margaret Seymour uses her status as Emily Crawford's mother to regain her footing, you won't be able to exact your revenge." Thus, it was urgent to ensure within these 3 days that Margaret Seymour couldn't turn the situation around. Even if Claire Crawford took action, Marquis Crawford wouldn't be displeased with her because she was avenging her mother. What could he say against that? "Let's go. I will accompany you. Although in 3 days you will officially be my princess, in my heart, you are already my woman," Eric Stewart said. Together, they went to Maple Woods Court, where Emily Crawford was quietly wiping her tears. Margaret Seymour was ill and under house arrest, with the matriarch refusing to call a doctor. Marquis Crawford showed no concern, and Emily's pleas to him were coldly dismissed. At this moment, Margaret Seymour felt extremely unwell, but seeing Emily brought her some comfort. "Emily, don't cry. I'm fine. Seeing you finally get what you wished for makes me happy. But remember what I told you, okay?" Emily nodded while wiping her tears and said, "I remember, and you must hold on. Once I become Prince Lance's consort, I will support you. If not, I'll bring you to Prince Lance's residence. You must stay strong." Margaret Seymour smiled, but just then, Claire Crawford and Eric Stewart barged in. Emily Crawford froze, then angrily said, "Third sister, why did you barge in without announcing yourself? Leave now, my lady needs to rest. Look at that, she truly speaks with the demeanor of a Prince Lance's consort." Unfortunately, Eric Stewart was also there. "Prince Eric, could you please ask her to leave? I have matters to discuss with Margaret Seymour." Claire Crawford wanted to deal with Margaret Seymour before leaving, and Emily Crawford would ruin it. Seeing Claire Crawford storm in like that, Emily Crawford couldn't let her bully others. "Claire Crawford, what exactly do you want? My lady may be under house arrest, but you must remember, she is still your elder." Emily Crawford refused to leave, but Eric Stewart stopped her. At that moment, he looked at Emily Crawford and smiled, though there was a hint of threat. "Miss Crawford, you wouldn't want me to escort you out myself, would you?" Emily Crawford was extremely frightened. She didn't expect Eric Stewart to support Claire Crawford like that. How could she be so powerful, making someone obey her so easily? "Emily, leave," Margaret Seymour spoke up. She lay on the bed looking frail, but showed no fear. "My lady." Emily Crawford was still worried but eventually left. Claire Crawford smiled at Margaret Seymour, took out a small prepared bottle, and placed it on the table.
What is this?
Margaret Seymour knew she had lost. There was nothing to fear.
She was already in this state, what else was there to fear? Margaret Seymour, years ago you poisoned my lady, secretly and maliciously. These are the testimonies of living witnesses, and I have evidence. Look at these proofs, one by one. Am I falsely accusing you?
Margaret Seymour glanced at Claire Crawford's evidence. She knew it was all true.
But why admit it?
Margaret Seymour continued to smirk coldly, then looked at her opponent. Claire Crawford, all these years you've hidden your true intentions well.
You're indeed formidable, but do you really think I will confess? Does it matter if one admits or not? Do you think I care?
Margaret Seymour looked at Claire Crawford. She was a rare intelligent person, and having come here today with these pieces of evidence showed she had more tricks up her sleeve. Margaret Seymour couldn't guess what else her opponent had planned.
Speak, tell me everything, what exactly do you want me to do?
Margaret Seymour, lying on the bed, was very uncomfortable. The Marquis Crawford hadn't visited in days, making her feel even more humiliated.
In 3 days, Emily Crawford and I will both marry. You know how you got the position of Prince Lance's consort. If rumors spread that Emily Crawford's stepmother was the one who killed my mother, how much would Prince Lance protect me? Wouldn't it cause an uproar? Would father, for the sake of reputation, replace Emily with Vincent Crawford to marry Prince Lance?
Margaret shuddered at these words. This was not good news. Emily Crawford had sacrificed so much, and now nothing could go wrong.
This bottle of medicine is specially prepared for you, similar to the poison you used on my mother back then. I've improved the formula a bit.
Once you drink it, there's no cure, but I can ensure nothing happens on the wedding day.
Claire Crawford wasn't negotiating with Margaret Seymour but forcing her to choose. After scheming all her life, would she choose to live or ruin Emily Crawford?
Though Emily stood outside the door, she heard everything clearly and rushed in.
Mother, mother. Emily always knew how to appear pitiful, but what good did it do now? Claire Crawford wasn't like those men who would pity her. Margaret Seymour, I'm waiting for your choice.
Claire looked cold and ruthless, without hesitation. Margaret knew she had no options left. If Emily were ruined, all her years of effort would be wasted. But she was unwilling. Surprisingly, Emily was the first to speak. She truly liked Prince Lance, and her only wish for years was to marry him. Mother, we can't let her cause trouble.
If she does, what will happen to me? Everything I've worked for will be destroyed.
Emily's words were filled with genuine concern, but their meaning was crystal clear. It seems the elder sister has made her choice.
If you feed the medicine to your mother yourself, I still won't reveal the past secret.
Claire smiled. Emily's hesitation made Margaret lose all hope. Indeed, she was heartbroken. Emily was willing to let Margaret die to fulfill her desires, marking the most devastating defeat in all of Margaret's plans.
Margaret Seymour, what meaning does your life have? No one wishes for you to live.
I've never forgotten my mother's death and always sought revenge. But now, the person you love most, your daughter, hopes for your death to achieve her goals.
You are truly pitiable. Margaret's spirit was crushed because Claire was right.
Chapter 64, Margaret Seymour's suicide. Margaret Seymour, I leave the choice to you, I won't make it for you. Claire Crawford spoke with a smile, as Margaret Seymour had reached a dead end.
Why should she play the villain?
Let people choose for themselves. Ultimately, whether they choose to live or die is their own decision.
Margaret Seymour, my patience has limits. Giving you this opportunity in time doesn't mean I can wait forever.
I hope you appreciate the rare time I'm giving you, Claire Crawford said before leaving. After she left, Eric Stewart took out a handkerchief, silently looking at Claire Crawford, thinking she was heartbroken beyond endurance.
Don't be sad. In the future, if anyone bullies you, I'll fight them for you. Eric Stewart's words were amusing, yet to Claire Crawford, they were sincere.
If only the original owner had met someone like him, truly devoted to her, she wouldn't have been harmed to death.
This vast estate was rotten at its core, so no matter what you did,
the outcome would be the same. Claire Crawford didn't cry, she simply couldn't.
But she recognized Eric Stewart's sincerity in her heart.
Don't cry. If you're sincere, take me away from this estate, and I'll do my best to help you achieve what you want. Claire Crawford wholeheartedly supported Eric Stewart.
However, what Eric Stewart wanted was simply for Claire Crawford to enter the estate, so they could truly be a family.
He not only desired the world in that position but also the woman in front of him.
That's only natural. Eric Stewart didn't end up offering the handkerchief, and together they returned to Peach Blossom Pavilion. February Moon had someone prepare 2 bowls of lamb soup, but Eric Stewart hadn't eaten yet.
Now you can eat something warm, the lamb soup is neither too hot nor too cold, just right for you, Claire Crawford said, prompting Eric Stewart to realize he no longer needed to eat cold food.